Hi, everybody. Let's get started on the wildlife portion of Con 102. My name is John Van Eel. It makes life a little bit easier for you. It's still a John teaching Con 102. I've been at Flick for about 25 years now, and I absolutely love this class. I'm giving you my home cell phone number here just to make things a little bit easier for us in these online conditions. So don't be afraid to text me anytime you want or give me a call if you're having a problem with this class or anything else. That's my official email at the college as well. You can contact me through Blackboard. It all gets to the same place. So even though this half of the class is called wildlife, we really only focus on mammals. That's why I've got wildlife in quotes there. And I told you I've been doing this for a long time. For the 25 years I've been at Flick, I've had some pretty cool wildlife experiences that I'm going to be able to share with you guys. Now, both of these pictures are in captivity. You can see the fence in the background behind the black bear. He was not easy to teach to read. And the moose that I'm petting is also in captivity as well. But more stories about them as the semester goes on. And I really have to say that it sometimes doesn't feel like work when I'm at FLCC. All four of these pictures I took while taking students places. I've brought students to Yellowstone twice, Newfoundland a couple times, went to South Africa with Maura Sullivan this past summer with students. And this was a place up in Canada where we used to be able to go to photograph captive wildlife. I will show you some more pictures from that later in the semester, and I will always tell you when I have a picture of an animal in captivity. These are pictures that I would say give you the idea that when I'm playing, I'm doing the same things that I'm doing when I'm working. So my daughter and I at Yellowstone a few years ago, John Faust and I at work up here with a black bear that was relocated from a place farther south in New York up to our Mueller Field Station. So you know you've got a cool job when your work pictures look like your vacation pictures. All right, let's get down to business. So you should have that Word document that I posted along with this. If you do not, I don't care if you've got them open in two different windows or if you've printed it out and you're writing things down, but I really want you to be focusing on this and the Word document at the same time. You can pause this anytime you need to, of course, to fill things out. So let's get started. Let's make sure we know what a mammal is. And I've got a picture that I took in Yellowstone of a mammal here to get us thinking. Now, there's two things that all mammals have and only mammals have. And those two things are hair and milk. So if we were to give the most simple definition of a mammal has hair. And let's find out if that's true. So can you name any mammal in the world that does not have hair? Well, some of you maybe are thinking of whales or dolphins, for example. Turns out they do have hair. Not much, but they do. So they still count as hair. Who else? Who else can you think of that doesn't have hair? Well, once in a while, I'll get a student that'll name something like a Peruvian dog or a hairless cat. Of course, those animals still actually have a few hairs. In addition, they're a genetic anomaly. That's not what the species is supposed to be like. And in this day and age, it is impossible for me to teach this class without someone thinking of the naked mole rat. So the naked mole rat actually is hairless throughout most of its body, but just like whales and dolphins, they have a few hairs, some whiskers, so they do still count. Now let's do the opposite. Let's see, is there any animal you can think of that has hair that's not a mammal? So sometimes I'll get people that'll talk about like insects, like woolly bear caterpillars. Oh my gosh, those things are named wrong twice. So they're not really woolly, and of course they're not bears. But those projectiles that are on caterpillars do look like hairs. But if you were to look at them under a microscope, if you were to chemically analyze them, they're not hair. They should be called hair-like structures. I don't expect people to say that, but that's what they technically are. I don't know if you've ever seen a tarantula or owned one before, but they've got hair-like structures all over their whole body, and everybody says, "Oh my gosh, tarantulas are hairy," but that's not true hair. So true hair is found in only mammals, and every mammal species has hair. And let's do the same thing for milk. We've got things called milkweed, for example. Maybe you know what milkweed is. That's a plant that grows. If you've ever broken one open, you know they should have named it Elmer's glueweed, because just because it's got a white substance in it doesn't make it milk. It's really sticky, and it doesn't taste like milk. It is actually toxic, so take my word for that instead of trying it out yourself. And there is nothing else on the planet that makes milk except for mammals. Well, are mammals the only, or sorry, do all mammals make milk? Well, not every individual mammal makes milk. Males traditionally don't make milk, for example, but every mammal species does. So I don't care how gross it sounds to you, how weird the mammal is. If it's a mammal, it makes milk. So whales are mammals. Do whales give milk? Yes. Manatees, rats, cats, bats, all of those things give milk. So either of these terms could really be used as our definition of mammal, because all mammals have it and only mammals have it. Now there's a few other characteristics that I want you guys to know for class that either mammals share with other animals or not every single mammal has it. So warm-blooded, for example. I've got that written in quotes because we really should be calling that endothermic, meaning the heat comes from inside. So warm-blooded just signifies the fact that you've got your own furnace. You produce your own heat. You don't have to rely on the sun or a hot rock to give it to you like reptiles do. But of course, birds are warm-blooded as well. So even though this is a great characteristic, warm-blooded for mammals, it can't be used as a definition because there's lots of other animals that are warm-blooded besides mammals. That's very similar for live birth. So there's other animals that give live birth. Don't sharks get classified as live birth because the egg hatches inside the mother's body? And then, of course, there's a few mammals that even lay eggs and don't give live birth. But it's still a good characteristic. Third, we've got the developed brain. Mammals are the smartest animals on the planet. I can tell you that I can pit the dumbest mammal against the smartest fish, and the mammal wins every time. Now, that doesn't make mammals better, it just makes them smarter. And you knew mammals were smarter than fish. Fish are pretty dumb. They have to spend their entire life in schools, so that makes them not as smart as mammals are. And finally on this slide, we've got differentiated dentition. I wonder if you can say what differentiated dentition is without using the word different or without using the word dentition. So my best answer for this would just be to say that mammals have a variety of teeth. Mammals have all kinds of teeth. Think about the tusks on an elephant or a walrus or a narwhal. Think about the grinding teeth that a deer has or the stabbing teeth that a wolf has. Mammal teeth are going to be really important. Now, of course, you guys just spent half a semester studying fish, and you know that fish have teeth. But fish don't have the same kind of differentiation of their teeth. Neither do reptiles. Tyrannosaurus rex has got amazing teeth. A great white shark has fantastic teeth, but they're not differentiated. They're very similar from front to back, and they're very, very simple in design. So last thing I'm going to say before I flip this slide, notice how I have hair and milk in all capitals. That's because those are the two that you absolutely have to know. Those are found only in mammals and all mammals. And then everything else is in lowercase because these are good characteristics, but they are not exclusive to mammals. Last characteristic, we always say that mammals are good parents. And I would like to know, what did I just teach you? What was on that last slide that helps you predict this? Yeah, you probably got that right. So it's the milk, right? So it doesn't do any good to produce milk for your offspring if you're going to be a deadbeat mom. So there's no broadcast spawning mammals like there are fish. Mammals don't swim upstream, lay their eggs, and then die because mammals have to be there, at least the mother does, in order to give the baby their food. This is an example of a picture that would be terrible on the quiz. I've cut the head off of the female, so it makes it very difficult to identify this species. If you're wondering, these are bighorn sheep. This was in South Dakota. And I would never give you a question like this on the test. There's just not too much here to be able to identify that. Now, the reason why I put good parents in quotes is because not every single parent is a good one. I stole this picture off of the internet. This is not a picture that I took myself. But just because one individual is not a good mom, that doesn't mean that mammals themselves aren't good parents. And of course, dads, there's some species of mammals where the male takes absolutely no part in raising the young, and other species of mammals where the dad is super important. Okay. Another concept that I like to start the semester off with, or at least my portion of the semester, is there's more mammal species in the western United States than there are here in the east. And the question is why? Well, you've got the answer written there right in front of you, so it's not much of a mystery unless you haven't opened up that Word document like I asked you to. And here's what I've got it boiled down to. Western states have different habitats than the east, and they've got fewer animal species that have been eliminated. And I don't remember exactly where I took this picture. It was somewhere in the Canadian Rockies. And if you've never been to the Canadian Rockies, they're like the U.S. Rockies on steroids. It's really worth going to. But this is obviously a Western photo. There's nothing in the East that looks like this. So one of the examples that I always give, and I put it on your sheet there, is that we don't have any deserts in the East. So there's no desert mammals in the East. We don't have as high of elevation in the East as they do in the West. So there's some mammals that live in the West but couldn't live in the East because we just don't have the right mountains for them. And that brings us to this vocabulary word here. I'm guessing that everybody knows what extinction is. I'm sure before you took this class, you'd used the word extinct before. But I'm wondering if you've ever used the word extirpated. So this picture of a caribou on the left there is from Denali National Park up in Alaska. Caribou still exist on this planet, but they don't exist in New York State anymore. They've been all killed because of the crime of deliciousness. So they were wiped out before there was any hunting season at all. Caribou have been extirpated from New York. But they're not extinct because there's some that still live. And then this young mountain goat at the bottom would be an example of a mammal species that was never found in the East. We just don't have mountains that are high enough in the East for that. So those are our two reasons why there are more kinds of animals, mammals specifically in the West than there are here in the East. Okay, a big point that I need to make to you in the beginning here is that Faust wanted you guys to all know about fish identification in the hand. So the goal was to get you to be able to grab a fish out of the water, off of your hook, and say, what is this? And so when he gave you quizzes, you were able to ask questions like, what's the color of the inside of that fish's mouth? How many rays does it have on that fin? Stuff that demonstrated you have the knowledge that if that animal was in your hand, well, that's what I would be looking at. What I want you to do is be good at field identification. There are certainly times when you will hold mammals in your hand in this employment area, but it is much better for you to be proficient with mammals in the field. And the very first hurdle to overcome is just knowledge. My daughter actually took this picture. We're at Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge, and you can see we're on a gravel road here. This is what's called the main drive. And she's young enough that she's standing up in my wife's minivan with the side door open and standing up and not hitting her head on the ceiling and took this picture with a digital camera. This animal is so close that the only issue we could possibly have for not identifying correctly would be I just don't have the knowledge to do so. So the reason why I use this as my example is I used to volunteer at Montezuma much more than I do today. And I showed up with some paperwork that I had to hand in. And the woman at the visitor center asked if we would go out on the wildlife drive and see what's out there. This exact animal right here had been identified to her. She couldn't leave the visitor center and go and look herself. But visitors were telling her that there was a wolf, a coyote, a dog, a coy dog, or a gray fox running around on the wildlife drive. So this one animal right here was identified as 5 different things to her. Clearly the problem isn't that it's too far away. There's no visitor that was going to get a better look at this and then suddenly understand it. They just didn't have the knowledge to be able to identify it. Do you know what it is? It's a coyote. And he doesn't have mange. I get that from a lot of people. He's just in a summer coat here. This is obviously a summer picture if you look at the background. And he's just got a thin coat. He's literally never even had a winter coat because this is a young coyote. Mange is patchy, sort of hair loss. This is thin hair throughout its whole body, so nothing mangy about this guy at all. The next problem we have with field identification in mammals is that mammals are nocturnal or secretive. So as much as you want to go see mammals, they most of the time don't want to be seen. So that can pose a bit of a problem in the field. And then really there are just some mammals that are hard to identify. So these are the two Peromyscus mice that are found in New York State. Peromyscus is the name of the genus, and when you look at them, they're nearly identical, and it's sometimes impossible to tell which is which, even if you have them in the hand. But about 75% of the time, you can tell who's who by holding it and looking at several different characteristics. But often we will just have to say it was a mouse of some kind. Or if you know the fancy word Peromyscus, you could say, well, I know what genus it was in. So we get to do that for a few animals here. We get to do that for flying squirrels. Flying squirrels are difficult to tell in the field. So if you saw a flying squirrel next week when you're out and about, I would say you saw one of the two, either northern or southern flying squirrel here in New York State. And it's okay to just say flying squirrel SP. We'll do that for long-tail and short-tail weasel. Well, like I mentioned, we'll do that for the mice. We'll do it for our shrews and our moles. But I don't want you to get into a bad habit. I don't want you to think that you could do that for just anything. So in John's class, it was very important that you identified an animal, the species. You couldn't just say LFM for a minnow. You have to say which minnow it is. And that's going to be true for us for many of them. But we have a few that are just really difficult to tell in the field. I don't know if any of you guys had Clinton Krager for biology, but that's him releasing a flying squirrel that we caught at field camp a few years ago. All right, let's talk about some expectations that I have for you for the class. First, now you've got an idea of how fast I talk, so hopefully that'll work for you guys, especially given the fact that you've got a video here and you can pause it anytime that you need to. So we're going to do things a little bit differently than you did in fish class. So fish, it was mostly photos and specimens. For mammals, I'm going to add skulls too. And then to a lesser extent, and that's why I have it in italics here, tracks, scat, or other sign. So obviously you know what track and sign are, but does everybody know what scat is? Scat's that word that begins with an S, ends with a T, but it's polite to say for poop. Did you do any scat identification at all with fish? Any bass, turds, log, perch, brown trout? One more. Crappie? None of that at all? So you'll need to know some of those, some of the more common and easy to identify ones for our mammals. Another difference is we're going to go up to orders instead of just learning families. You guys did families for fish. We're going to do orders and families. It's not like I just doubled your workload here, though. There's only 7 orders that you need to know, and it just makes sense for us to start there. And then just like you did with fish, you're going to need to know some basic natural history, maybe how they breed, what kind of habitat they like, or management challenges. Every mammal will be a little bit different. Your textbook does a great job of covering all of this, and I'm hoping that you have enough time to be able to do some reading in the book. I crossed out participate in group and class discussions because that'll be harder to do since we're not doing it live at this moment. But it doesn't mean that you are exempt from asking me questions or chiming in. I really feel like the best way to learn is to be actively engaged. So I'm hoping that people are going to be emailing me and texting me with issues and questions. Great. And then there's no teacher in the world that would ever not say this, but everybody wants you to make connections with the material that they present, like I did with the good parent thing in the milk. And it doesn't mean that this has to be like rocket science here. Let me just give you an example. Okay. So why are we frozen here? Okay. So for example, this is all true. Gray squirrels bury their nuts over huge areas. You've all seen that. There's a picture of a squirrel doing it. The fancy word for that is that a gray squirrel is a scatter hoarder. Red squirrels store their nuts in a few concentrated piles. The fancy word for that is larder hoarding. So now I want you to make a prediction. Which is more territorial, the gray squirrel that buries his nuts over a huge area, or the red squirrel that stores his nuts in a few piles? Excuse me. Well, notice that I asked you here to predict. Some of you have had experience with red and gray squirrels, and you may have an answer based on previous knowledge. Maybe you've read something, maybe you've watched something, but I'm asking you to just predict it based on what I've got here. And the answer actually is that red squirrels are more territorial. Think about it. Red squirrels have so much more to lose. If I have all my money in one place, like under my mattress, if somebody finds that, I lose everything. But if I've got my money buried in mason jars scattered all throughout my backyard like a normal person, then somebody can come and rob me, but they're never going to find everything. They're never going to get it all. So the gray squirrel could lose a few acorns, walnuts here and there, but they're not going to lose everything. The red squirrel has so much more to lose, so he can't afford to let his guard down at all and can't let anybody else in. Okay, a couple words about the outline. So I posted a revised outline on Blackboard, and I took a snippet of it here for you guys to have a look at. So if you notice, I've amended the dates here. So we still have 8 weeks of material to do. We just have 7 weeks to do it in. So our first, where'd you go? Arrow's gone. So the first week of class after your 2 week spring break is March 3rd to April, excuse me, March 30th to April 3rd. And the topics are definition of mammal, which we just went over, feeding, which I have a PowerPoint coming up about that. Tracks is another PowerPoint. And then I'll do something about all of the orders. Then I'd like you to get started on reading about possums, shrews, and moles. In your book, your textbook, Elbrock and Reinhardt, you've got page 2 to 13 to read. That's just the introduction. And then the whole rest of the book is set up by chapters. So read the chapter on possum, read the chapter on shrews, and then finally read the chapter on moles. And then the last column here all the way to the right, I have a blog that I'd like you to read. I'll explain that in just a second. And the only blog label that you have for the first week of class is opossum. I just want to encourage you guys that as you find time to go ahead and feel free to go forward. So if all you can manage to do is keep up with the class, then that's fine, this pacing here. But if you've got extra free time this week, just go ahead and dive in ahead. It won't do you any harm at all to get ahead on things here. We really don't know what's coming up and what our time is going to be like later in the semester. And then the opposite is also true. If for some reason you don't have enough time to do this, you got to reach out and you got to tell me. We got to figure out another plan. I want everybody to pass this class and pass it well and learn this stuff so that next year when you're back, most of you are freshmen and coming back next year, I am going to be able to have you in my wildlife management class and you will know all this stuff and not be penalized because we're doing it online. So the blog that I have, the title of it is Backyard Beasts, and I'm going to click on it here. But as I've got my cursor hovered, have a look at the title there. The title of the blog is www.con102 blogspot. So Con 102 is your class. I literally made this blog with this class in mind here. I haven't added anything to the blog in a long time because I've got other things going on. But there's tons of content here. Please ignore the stuff on the left for just a minute and let me go down here and go to where it says labels. Hell, I don't know why they call them labels instead of keywords, but it's the same thing. So all of these are labels that I've chosen. When I write a post, I label it with a keyword. So you notice American robin, for example. There's one post about American robins. There's one post about bald eagles. Ooh, there's a whole bunch of posts about bear cubs, bear dens, and such. And your very first one that you're supposed to check out is opossum. Let's go down. There's 8 entries for opossum. Sorry, lots. And here's what I would ask you to do. Once I've clicked on opossum, it gives me all of the posts here, but they give them to me from newest to oldest. And I'm going to scroll all the way down here and tell you the best way to do this. Am I making you dizzy? I apologize. The best way to do this is start at the bottom and work your way up. So read these the way I wrote them. Read the oldest one first and then work your way back up. Okay? If you don't do that, it's not the end of the world, but especially with the possums, there's some stories that go sequentially, so it would make more sense for you. Well, that was my first TED Talk. Thank you very much for joining me. I have more videos that I'm going to be making and posting. Feel free to keep right up on things like I said. And for the last time today, I will tell you, reach out if you need it. Thank you very much.